Welcome to another edition of Be the Change Georgia, where we amplify the voices of the inspiring business leaders surrounding the B Corp and social impact movements across the Southeast to help you learn how to build your legacy at the intersection of people, planet, purpose, and profit. Today, there are more than 8,000 B Corps in over 80 countries and 180 different industries, unified by one common goal: transforming the global economy to benefit all people, communities, and the planet. If you want to learn how to plug into our purpose-driven business community alongside the inspiring leaders we feature on this show, check us out at blocalgeorgia.com or on Instagram or Facebook at blocalgeorgia, and we'll hope to meet you at our next event. Today, you'll have the opportunity to learn from Jenny Morgan, founder of Pact Three and author of the book Cancel Culture and Climate. Jenny's career spans hospitality, tech, and sustainability consulting, where she has used her entrepreneurial spirit and passion for inclusivity to help organizations navigate the intersection of profitability and purpose. Through her work in the B Corp movement and beyond, she's transformed businesses, events, and industries into more conscious, community-focused spaces. In this episode, we'll dive into Jenny's journey from hosting women in tech events to leading sustainability initiatives, her strategies for fostering empathetic conversations that inspire change, and her vision for making sustainability and B Corp certification more inclusive and accessible. Stay tuned for an inspiring conversation about leadership, sustainability, and how collaboration and transparency can drive meaningful progress for businesses and communities. Jenny Morgan, how are you? Welcome to Be the Change Georgia.
Hi, I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, excited to finally get this recorded, get this on. I remember when we first met, we had an instant connection in the topic we'll be covering today. But just excited to unpack your story, and it's always cool to have somebody not necessarily in the state of Georgia, but you're actually from the state of Georgia. So I feel like it works.
Yes, it definitely does. Through and through.
Yeah, and excited to get tell people about your new book and kind of get the Jenny Morgan story and just share it with our listeners. So let's dig in.
Sounds good.
We obviously always do a pre-call kind of session to kind of figure out where we want to go and what questions. But it became pretty clear with you that you're a natural hustler and that you've been that natural hustler from a young age. So early age entrepreneurship, all these things, how do those experiences shape your leadership style? And then how would you define your leadership today?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a bit just because when I start talking about how I was a bit of a go-getter and a hustler from birth, to be honest, I was always very scrappy and had a lot of drive. And that was my original perception of what leadership was. It's this grit and grind and ability to adapt and, be able to be very, aggressive in your pursuit of anything that you want and don't let anything stand in your way. And now that I have a bit more experience under my belt, I'm now seeing that those characteristics can definitely support someone that's looking to, become very engaged in something they're passionate about. But true leadership is more about how you inspire others to then find those aspects of themselves naturally too. And so you need that ability to adapt and grow and grind, but also in a more empathetic and inspiring type of way. And so I, throughout my career, have been able to slowly grow that muscle of how can I help people find their own strengths and apply them to what we're working on and really create a movement rather than, this kind of solo type of journey. And so I'm really trying now to find ways to light everyone else's fires too, because that's really how I view our ability to be successful. I don't think we can be successful in silos or by ourselves. And so that's my new kind of way of addressing leadership, is making sure that it's something that is encouraging and inclusive.
Yeah, I can see where those like tendencies, those traits, whatever, could be like, I don't want to say toxic, but they can go either way. That like win at all costs can, there's definitely some bad people in history that wanted to win at all costs. But you found
Yeah.
a way to channel it for good.
Yes, I do. I mean, I have been toxic myself, up at 3 a.m., like trying to do two full-time jobs at the same time, and then having to kind of realize where balance exists and what balance means for me. And that balance is fluid. I can be, able to juggle a lot of things at one time, one year or one day even, and then another time that isn't the right time for me to be acting that way. And so, yeah, it's finding balance and finding ways to complement one another, I think has been something that through maturity in my career, I've been able to navigate that a little bit more effectively.
Yeah, no, it's definitely it's an interesting balance too of like what's toxic, what isn't. And yeah, at what point does um like tenacity and win at all costs like overwhelm you or take
Right.
that negative like because it's like a positive thing and can be very negative. So your career journey, you touched on it. You've done hospitality, you've done tech. Now you did sustainability consulting. You founded Pact Three. Like, what sparked from all that? Because I have a very similar story. Like, at what point did like all of a sudden like did the sustainability light bulb go off for you?
Yeah. So I was in hospitality and I was really growing my career in trade shows and in person engagement. And then I was able to bring those skill sets to a nonprofit, and I was kind of doing two positions at once. And I was growing that nonprofit and that presence. What I was trying to do through in person engagement is create more of an inclusive environment in the tech space. And so with that work, I then was able to transfer into tech exclusively. And I was working at Microsoft for a while. I began to manage a team there. Our team grew, and it was a group of very talented individuals that were able to find ways to integrate inclusion and accessibility, better learning mechanisms and tactics and things of that sort. And we were a really great team, and in that, every year we were always trying to outdo ourselves. And we began to realize, and I began to realize, that we were missing a complete part of equity that was somewhat being ignored, which was sustainability. And we've talked about sustainability and energy, being able to wake up every day and continue to sustain that level of energy output. But then also, how can we integrate sustainability into the ways that we're engaging other people? And I began to read the B Corp handbook. I read Project Drawdown, which is a really good resource to learn, various climate solutions out there. And so that was kind of my professional journey. But when it became very apparent was in 2020. It was a rough year for a lot of people. But I had just given birth to our second child, and there was an enormous amount of wildfire smoke that had come into our neighborhood, and it lingered there for about a week. And so it was the middle of the pandemic, two little kids under 3, two dogs, two adults. And then now, the only thing you could really do at that time is go on a walk or be in your backyard. But now you can't do that because the air quality is so severe that you can't go outside. And so it even started coming into the house. And that was when I knew that I can continue to be a participant in this type of work, or I can be a leader in this work. And that was the personal light bulb that kind of went off, that I don't want to just compost, which is composting is awesome. And, if you do that and you make that choice, it's an effort. I wanted to take it a bit further. And so I wanted to find ways that you could integrate profitability and purpose naturally, which the B Corp movement is, definitely proficient at. And so that's what really kicked it into gear, is 2020. And then I've continued to just always educate, network, and try to really be an advocate for climate action.
That's awesome. Oh well, not the why,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that
you
is,
got to it.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's life, right? Like when you ask, how did you get to this place? Usually there's some ups and downs in that story. And so, that was the down, but it really got me lit a fire under me to get more involved. So yeah, it's a bittersweet memory.
Yeah, we had a guest on recently from Atlanta that said if you've never been on your back, I don't think that you've ever seen the sun. So I think there's something to be said about like through the darkest
I
moments
love
come
that.
the opportunities to shine.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great. I'm going to steal that.
So you mentioned the B Corp movement. It's obviously been transformative for many organizations. It's grown. I think I'm afraid to say a number because then this will sound really dated in a couple of years, but we're over 9,500 around the world now. We'll cross 10,000 at some point early next year. But you've also talked about not necessarily just the B Corp movement, but the business for good movement, the sustainability movement. I have my own thoughts. I will leave those on the side and hear yours about the need to be more inclusive and the need to break down barriers and expand access to this. And I think that's kind of the impetus of where you kind of got to with the book, which is called Cancel Culture and Climate. So I'd love to unpack that a little bit and kind of hear more of both how we do it and the symptoms that we need to correct and how we go about correcting them.
Yeah, I think when we inspire others, if we are striving to be more purposeful in our personal and professional lives, it can be very inspiring. And then at a certain point, there's a really fine line to walk that is how to continue to progress and be more and more purposeful every day. How can I show up to be a better person today than I was yesterday, but then not shame Jenny from yesterday? And as you become more and more proficient in this space, you can accidentally, unintentionally isolate others from taking that first step. You might be on step 5,000 and they want to be on step 1, and we need to make that journey exciting for people and organizations to start rather than, we all want to be Patagonia. And I think what Patagonia has done is incredible. And they themselves see purposeful business as a journey and not a destination. But they're very far down the line of their journey. And I think when organizations see that, they then judge themselves or we judge each other. And I'm trying to find ways that we can continue to inspire rather than shame or blame. And so that's really the purpose of the book, primarily focused around climate, but cancel culture in general and any sort of impact movement isolates people from joining the movement. And all of these movements are successful when we have a larger army. And if we continue to shame and blame, we will continue to reduce the amount of people on the team. And so that's my goal of the book. And I have tools in there to help, navigate that space and inspire rather than tear people down.
Well, it's tough too because in a weird sense, you're safer on the sidelines or in the
Yeah.
stands. You're safer not doing anything, taking any action, and basically drawing any attention to yourself other than the widget or the product or the whatever. Nespresso went through this in the B Corp community, and people's heads exploded. But you're kind of asking the same question I keep asking of what sins of the past are irredeemable, and if we really want to change things, how do we change them if we have some of our biggest corporate players on this, on whatever, on the sideline in the stands, afraid to get into the game because they're going to be canceled?
Yeah. I mean, there are so many organizations that are almost feeling as if they're too large or their history is too tainted that they will never be a part of this type of movement, whether within the B Corp movement specifically or just as a purposeful organization. And that is a flaw in the model, because if we are deciding what characteristics other than being purposeful, what characteristics actually define an organization that is doing this effectively, if it's based on size or revenue or history or past sins or misspeaking or not speaking about a specific topic, if we've got all of these somewhat nuanced lists in our mind that haven't actually been written down and put into place, we're not really operating under a formula. And the intention is to operate under a formula that measures purposefulness. And so we have to really check ourselves. Am I judging entities and organizations based on nuance, or is there an actual fact that I can point to that actually has a solution that someone can either decide to or to not engage with? But is there an actual formula? Otherwise, we're just kind of like guessing, and guessing never really truly moves a movement. You need to have data and paths forward.
Yeah, no, 100%. And then again, it's interesting with because I mean, I fall victim to this too, of sitting there judging somebody, but I'm like, at the end of the day, how how do we move forward if they're not allowed to, rectify those mistakes? And I've gotten into that conversation. I had a friend that I'll just say he moved to Brooklyn, um, went off the deep end for a little while, and was like, "Oh, all recycling is greenwashing." And I'm like, "Oh, don't get me wrong, this what like." But still, I'm not going to like throw my aluminum can in the trash. You know what I mean? Like, there's this like, if nothing matters, then why do we do any of it? So, like, if you're not on that, like you mentioned Patagonia earlier, if you're not on step 5,000, well, then step one's pointless. But in reality, what we just don't know is that Patagonia was an early adopter and was on step one, 35, 40 years ago. So, getting people like celebrating those steps and celebrating you don't go on the plane doesn't magically land in Seattle. I have to pack my bags, get in the car, drive to Atlanta, find parking at the airport, go through security. Like, there's all those steps before all of a sudden I'm magically on the other side of the country. And I think that's what we've lost a little bit.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned this earlier about being silent or on the sidelines. If we aren't brave enough to talk about the steps that go into place to making things possible, that's when there's the perception, it doesn't match the reality. And so if things just magically become purposeful and impactful and perfect, or they're at least presented that way, it gives the illusion that there isn't that grind and that, that the journey behind it. And if we can be more transparent, and in the book I reference an enormous amount of organizations that are doing it properly, about being really transparent and forthright in their challenges, asking for help, collaborating publicly. Those are rare occurrences, which it should be the norm. And so, yeah, I think if we don't come to conversations with curiosity and acceptance, in addition to accountability, I'm not saying like we should just be, willy-nilly letting everything fly, but if we can be collaborative and empathetic about challenges, that makes challenges normal, and that's reality. And so, yeah, I hope that through this book, or just through conversations like this, that we can continue to instill that confidence in not being perfect.
It's 100%. It comes back to like the quote I keep. It's just been ever since I heard it. God, it was this summer. You can either be an arsonist or an architect. And I feel like people that come to me with good intentions that want to do better, I don't know. Like, there's like an obligation to help them. There's an obligation to want to see them be successful in the things that they want to accomplish with their sustainability mission. Or, a lot of times it'll be something that's super simple, like working with a client that's like, you're like, well, we struggle to recruit diverse candidates. And you're like, where are we recruiting? But they're genuinely concerned. They want to do better. And sometimes the answer is literally the easiest answer in the world, at least to me, because I live in the space. But like, I want to encourage them to continue and to go further, and to, like, okay, let's set metrics around your candidate pool, and let's set metrics around, your, who's getting through to the interview round. And then let's really, like, same thing with climate stuff. I really want to dig in of like, okay, where could we start? Okay, we're not even recycling in the office. Okay, bam. Like, such easy things to do to get people going and get them excited, get them some easy wins. And, it's like being a sports fan. It's like momentum, you complete quarterback struggling, he completes a couple passes. All of a sudden you see the confidence grow a little bit.
Yes, completely. I mean, if you just there's a ripple effect and you can see it happen. I mean, I mentioned composting and talking about individuals. My of a family. I was just about to out her,
Yeah.
but my canceler. But I have a family member. There's no way that she would ever compost. It's just there's things that happen with composting. You might get a couple fruit flies. It's just kind of there's just some things you have to accept if you're going to compost, and she'll never do that. That just is never going to happen. But she does now collect her plastic wrap and bring it to Target. And that's then kind of created this whole ripple of her deciding when she's able to do something more sustainable or not. And is that perfection? No. Did we just make significant progress? Yes. And so, I mean, we're dropping quotes here. There's a quote about, do we need 1 million people doing sustainability work perfectly, or do we need 8 billion people doing it imperfectly? And if we could do that, imagine, would we even really be in this predicament if we were all just doing a bit better each and every day to our own means, like meet people where they are?
And let's be real too. As somebody who does trash walks, and sometimes even in my neighborhood, where let's just say the yard signs tell me which side they're on. I'm like, man, I pulled some things out of recycling where I'm like, I'm glad you have recycling, but your broken vacuum doesn't go in there. So like, but there's the
Yeah.
element of like, so like, even I think the people who think they probably do it perfectly, who are probably more um, likely to be on the canceling side of things, you're probably not getting it right either. So, I think we should all embrace that we're on our own journey. You might be a couple steps ahead because you recycle and roll it out to the curb every Thursday, but it doesn't mean you're not commingling the rest of our recycling and sending it to the landfill.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, anything that's based on consumers understanding all of the steps is a, somewhat of a flawed system we've seen. Yeah. I
Yeah.
reference in the book about how we've all been canceled about recycling because on everything it says, please recycle. And it's this campaign kind of where we're just being begged to do the right thing and we're just opting not to. And so it's kind of creating this sense of shame. We went through the plastic straw gate, can we call it that, where we were shamed into believing that things were our fault. So we've all canceled others and been canceled, and we've all experienced it on either side. And it's time to spend less time trying to do detective work on those gotcha moments and really finding time to just respect one another and find a path forward that's collaborative, not spending so much time in controversy, more time in actually progressing.
Yeah. No, so my buddy Chad, who's on the Be Local Georgia board, we do trash cleanups. We did South Downtown Atlanta like 2 months ago. 102 bags with like 25 people in 2 hours. Unreal. I mean, I was literally had a shovel digging stuff out of the dirt. And there's somebody volunteering with us, and they were like, hey, you guys should really sort out all the recycling. And I'm like, brother, it's 102 bags of trash. Like, we're volunteers. Like for us, it's getting it off the street, keeping it out of the storm drains, keeping it out of the rivers, like which flow to the ocean. You can follow where your trash goes to get there. But it was just kind of like, it was like where I kind of like, it was that teachable moment with somebody who was much younger than me, where I was just like, hey, step one, like this is the step one right here, which is just like, get up, get your bag, get your grabber, get out of the street. And like, if you want me to drop 102 bags at your house later, I will. You can sort it, but and then like explain, well, a lot of this stuff is too dirty to be recycled. If the aluminum, if the cardboard's wet, like, so some of it, most of it, like even if it appears recyclable, is no longer recyclable because it's been sitting in, on the curb for 6 months and the plastic's so deteriorated, it crumbles. So it was just kind of a funny moment though, where you're like, oh, I love the ambition of like my 102 bags was not enough because we're not recycling what we picked up. And it's like, all right, man, well, you come pick up 102 bags on the reg. So
Yeah.
yeah, like what? Yeah, but again, it's one of those where I also don't want to squash that ambition of like him going like, but we could do more. I'm like, yeah, we totally could. And here's what's realistic, and like here's what's within our means. And it doesn't make me a bad person because Chad and I didn't spend the next 8 hours of our day off from working to sort recycling that we picked up in the street. So
Sure.
yeah, there's just that element too of like, how do I also encourage him to like, hey man, like I always want you to be like pushing for more without it being, which is kind of what you get to in the book. It's, you can push for more without shaming, which he never did. He didn't shame me or Chad,
Right.
but like without shaming, you can kind of like, get me thinking a little bit of like, I probably could sort some of this a little bit better if I know it's clean and it's, especially something like aluminum that's like infinitely recyclable. I could do a little bit better. All right, man, I hear you.
Yeah. I mean, if we're being transparent about the flaws in a system or the flaws in ourselves, whether they're warranted or not, now we actually have a choice where we can say, well, maybe next year we'll color code the trash and everyone's responsible for putting it in, or whatever that might be. But now it's a choice rather than you've pigeonholed someone into a corner. And so I want choices. If people have more choices and they can continue to, choose whether it's time or it's appropriate or not to grow whatever they're pursuing, that's great. It's when no one has a choice that it becomes a broken system for progress. So, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Give him a list and see what he comes back with.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's funny because I've heard that argument about your haters or whatever, people that do call you out for things, and I think if you've been through it, your skin's thicker, so you're more likely to like hear it as feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but a lot of times it's what it is. Like sometimes it's like once you get past the like, how dare you cancel me or whatever, or publicly shame me, like what were they trying to? Could they have gone about it in a different way? Maybe, but maybe sometimes there's some really, really, really good feedback deep down in there that you just didn't want to hear. And now you're kind of like, all right, how can I continue? And again, it comes back to that journey. How can I continue to improve? Or as a company, how can we continue to improve and not necessarily take it personally every time?
Yeah, when I talk about organizations that have been canceled or on the brink of potentially being canceled, the first thing you should do is just have an internal huddle. And that would be a safe place where you can get real feedback. And who better to provide feedback than your internal stakeholders that know your product and service intimately and are probably the most attuned to what's happening out in the public and kind of what could be improved upon. That's the first place where you can start, is having that safe conversation, and then you start to put action behind it. But yeah, creating more safe places where people and organizations feel comfortable talking about challenges openly, and they have the intention to improve upon them if said challenges are achieved and are able to be moved aside.
Yeah. And thinking of that, like, you kind of touched on this earlier, but like empathetic conversations, mutual respect, common grounds, they're key. Like, and honestly, we're at a precipice in this country where we better figure out how to do these things again. But can you share an example of like as we talk about progress and we beat the progress drum? Can you share an example of a challenging conversation you've had and like how that empathy and mutual respect helped drive change, or an example from the book if you have one?
Yeah, I talk about it a lot in the book, but one specific example is when I was engaging with a decision maker at a somewhat problematic corporation. And this decision maker was reaching out because they had been put, uh, sustainability success had been placed upon them in their scope of work now. And they felt somewhat victimized by that. And they had zero interest in it professionally or personally to engage, and were viewing our partnership and our just conversation in general somewhat as this forced upon obligation. And so it was kind of an interesting experience, but I was 75% done with the book. And so I was like, oh, I wonder if this seems like the most extreme experiment that I could run to see if I'm preaching from a mountaintop or if this is actually something that could change the world. That's the goal. And so I went through motivational interviewing steps. And in the book, I talk about it more in motivational conversation, because motivational interviewing, people talk about that all the time. A lot of that was discussed with vaccine mandates and during the pandemic and things. But motivational conversation makes it really clear that it's a two-sided conversation and it requires two parties. And so really what it's about is, first just actively listening and being open to hearing what they have to say. And so you're just building rapport. There's no judgment, there's no shame. And then you can kind of explore their perspectives. Why do they feel that way? What's the most important thing to them? What's top of mind? Where are they now? You're kind of establishing this persona of who they are. And then where can you insert relatable change into this conversation? So they've talked about cost margin, profit margin. They've talked about retention or, whatever these problems that they're looking to overcome. How can you integrate impactful efforts or climate action oriented efforts into this type of relationship? And so you start to create a connection of showing the pros and cons of having these two problems. Now they're combined. So now it's, now you're achieving both your original goals and the goal of positive impact simultaneously. It's not a choice. It's not an either or, it's an and. And then you can find common ground. And so we really went through these steps one by one. A lot of it was like about sports and vacations and what they want to do over the weekend, and then problems that they've been experiencing at their organization and how climate impact actually helps support those things, and then how to find balance and really make it a profit and a sustainability and conversation, and then kind of being, now we're on the same team, we're not against each other. And it was really beautiful to kind of see that happen in real time. And this was a individual representing an organization that some would find to be impossible to work with. And so what's next? I mean, now I would love to see 5 years from now where that individual and where that organization will be now that they've slowly, that ripple effect is happening. I wonder what it will look like 5 years from now when we're at 15,000 B Corps or whatever the aged number will be. But yeah, it's been really, and then I've also done it in like my personal life when I've got someone, I'm talking about the book and then they are like, I don't really believe in climate change, or I really don't think it's my vibe or something, they're dismissive about the problem. You switch the word to pollution. I don't care. I don't care that I change global warming to pollution, but now they do. And now we're talking about the same thing that we both care about, is not being able to go outside and not have air quality be so significantly poor that you have to go back in, or the beach
drive down the
being
street and feel shame of like your hometown because there's trash everywhere and litter and
right.
floating in the river, and it's gross.
Yes, exactly. Now we're talking about the same thing. And so, and I don't want to get into politics too much, but like conservation is a huge topic area on both aisles, and they're just worded differently at times, but that's a commonality that we often ignore. And so I think if we can continue to try to find that common ground in those commonalities, be patient, we're trying to not win an argument, we're trying to actually win to the goal, which is climate success. Now we're on to something. So
Yes, it's the outcome we're driving towards, not winning the day.
yeah.
No, that's really awesome, and I like that you brought it back to like, sometimes it's like I have to make the profitability argument. Like, I think we forget that we're selling these ideas. And I had a friend that worked at Arbor Day Foundation or whatever, and they told me in Atlanta they fundraise around climate change. And when they're in like South Georgia, they fundraise, they talk about like wildlife preservation and hunting and things like outdoor activities. And it's like, so it's like the same, literally the same pitch or the same mission, the same goal of planting trees and having healthy forests and blah, 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 and wildlife and ecosystem biodiversity. But yet, like, just to liberal people, they talk about climate change, and to conservative people, they talk about like, and it's like, but they're raising like, who cares? And I think we have to get to a point, not necessarily who cares, but I think we're forgetting, and I think that gets to the juxt of your book to kind of put a bow on it. Hopefully put a bow on it as a gift for somebody, or for yourself. But like, how do you, get away from the canceling and just remember what we're working towards? And that I think discouraging people to either enter the game or encouraging them to leave the game does the outcome, does the desired outcome no benefit?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We all want clean water. So like, let's just start there and
And clean air.
then build up from there. Yeah.
Yeah. And
We all want to have fun, breathe, and drink water. Those are things that most people like.
And eat fish that don't have plastic in them, but whatever, we'll start with the clean air.
That's a little too specific. Yeah.
Every time I get a straw out of like a storm drain when I'm picking up trash, I'm like, yeah, got it. Or like a little bitty piece of like a little ketchup packet or something. It's like a big day for me. Or the worst is when I slip and the grabber slips and I knock like the little airplane mini bottle into the storm drain. You're like, no.
Yeah.
So run down river and try to catch it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Nathan's a fish. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I want to go to a water treatment plant really bad just because I think that is fascinating. And it's something that we don't really think about. So that's my
regret of my life that I didn't make it to the Danbury, Connecticut, John Oliver water treatment plant when I was there. But I think I'm going back this year. So this year I will make it a point. And
okay. You got to do a live episode.
See if John Oliver will join me. I don't think this podcast is that popular yet.
Oh man, John Oliver was like one of my first examples when I first started talking about this, is because he did this like huge campaign, or campaign strong, but it ended up being one, is he did this huge monologue about how Kit Kat was looking to be carbon neutral and was kind of making fun of like, you don't want a Kit Kat bar in the first place, let alone care that they're carbon neutral. Like he was ragging on it. And I felt like it ended up being this like huge shame campaign against carbon credits. And, it really went down a rabbit hole. But it discouraged a lot of, and I'm not ragging on John Oliver, but the temperature of the climate space really changed because millions of people watched that episode and then kind of deemed it silly and
bullshit. Yeah.
Silly and bullshit. Yeah. And so it's a joke and it's not even real, and only like Kit Kat's doing it and no one really cares about it. And for me, I just think we got to really watch and I mean, he's a comedian that has a TV show. So like, this is an extreme example, but we need to watch the way we speak, because it does, it can change how people feel about an issue. And if you're trying to get people to feel inspired, you need to be really particular in the words that you're using, not in a way that you're like overly sensitive and afraid to talk, but just making sure that people feel like it's something. Like if you say recycling is a myth, yeah, recycling has huge problems and it's incredibly ineffective. But if you start kind of talking about that in a way that it can really shut people down, where they just are like, I'm going to throw everything in the trash because it ends up there anyway. So yeah, we have to be really intentional in the way we communicate.
Yeah, exactly. And like keep driving towards the bigger things, like not using single-use plastic, but knowing that even if 15% of it gets recycled, then keep recycling. Yeah, we're doing the best we can with what we have, and the rest of it we're rebuilding. So Jenny, thanks for coming on. This is awesome. Ever since the first time I met you, I was like, I remember your first LinkedIn message. I was like, wait, it's about cancel culture? I have strong feelings about cancel culture. Let's do this. So I'm very excited. So we'll have links in so everybody can purchase Cancel Culture and Climate. You can also visit cancelcultureandclimate.com to order the book, find out more, and give Jenny a follow on LinkedIn and on socials. We'll put all those links in the bio. Because we need everybody in this fight, and we need everybody encouraging others to join us. And all things that we talk about in the B Corp community, we need to think abundantly and work together towards solving some of society's most pressing issues. So we need y'all, and we don't need y'all canceling each other. So Jenny, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you so much. It was good seeing you.
Well, that wraps up another edition of Be the Change Georgia. We're grateful, as always, for the opportunity to serve you with this content and grow this incredible community of purpose-driven B Corp leaders. If you haven't already, we would be grateful for you to rate this show wherever you get your podcasts by simply tapping the number of stars you think it deserves and sharing it with a friend. This helps us get the word out and continue to use our collective influence as a force for good. This podcast wouldn't be possible without the help from our production team at Chat with Leaders Media. Learn how you can launch your own podcast to grow your business at chatwithleaders.com. Thanks again for listening, and now go be a leader worth following.